know, aviation has always attracted very independent people. People like the Duncans, people who really can make things happen. A lot of people get into aviation because they want more freedom, they want more opportunity in their business and professional lives. But even with all that independence in aviation, we really need a very strong, positive partnership with the federal government. I mean, you just can't have aviation grow and succeed if you don't have that positive partnership. And the last 2 years, frankly, have been one of the most frustrating ones for those of us in Washington who are trying to build a better relationship with the FAA and especially with Congress around the subject of aviation. And, you know, as a former member of Congress, I should be the last person to criticize Congress, I suppose. But let me tell you, it is disgraceful how poorly they have dealt with aviation issues in the last 2 or 3 years. I think most of you may not know this. I know certainly the people with the FAA and the airport know this. But the FAA does its work only if it is authorized to do its work by the Congress. And the Congress passes a bill called the Reauthorization Act every 5 years to lay out what Congress thinks should be the plan for the FAA for the next 60 months. And the last reauthorization was passed way back in 2002, and everybody in Congress knew that it was going to expire in 2007. I mean, this is not complicated calendar mathematics. You just figure 5 years later. And Congress is there to do its job to reauthorize that on a timely manner. Well, here we are, 2.5 years later, 3 years later, and we still don't have that reauthorization completed. They have done something that those of you in football fans, Cornhuskers, would know. It's known as the punt. You know, when you got something to do and maybe you're too tired or don't want to do it, you just punt. And so for 12 times in a row since that deadline of FAA reauthorization, Congress has punted, usually for 2 months, 3 months. They have a little, what they call continuing resolution, where they just continue the old bill for a few more months. And they've done that 12 times since 2007. The most recent time was 2 weeks ago, where they punted till the end of April. And we are waiting with bated breath, hoping that this reauthorization bill will be passed in the next, through conference committee and signed by the president in the next week or two. It finally got through the Senate, as I'm sure you know, 2 weeks ago. It had passed the House 6 months ago or so. And we are hopeful that some thorny labor issues won't stand in the way of getting the bill signed and through conference committee this next week or two. Why is that important? Well, it's important because the FAA is like any organization. If it feels it's being ignored by its overseers, by Congress, if it feels that nobody gives a damn about whether they get reauthorized or whether they have a future plan down on paper agreed to by everyone, the morale just goes to hell in a handbasket. I mean, it really is true. I've been to parts of the country where the FAA morale, I'm sure it's not the case here in Lincoln, but there are many places in the country where FAA morale is probably the lowest it's ever been in a long, long time. And there's such important work to be done. I mean, when you think about what lays ahead in the next 5 years in terms of air traffic control modernization, AIP funds, all of the conversion of all of this ground-based radars and all of that to NextGen, and you know, think of an activity that will be more important to companies like Duncan than getting that NextGen agenda moving forward quickly. Now, there's some of us in Washington who listen to the cynics who say the Congress will never get their act together, and they will just never get this all funded and agreed to on a timetable. But we're running out of time here in America. We may be ceding control of the future airspace design around the world to Europe, or even worse, to China, some other countries, if our FAA doesn't maintain the leadership role that we've taken for granted for 30 or 40 years. And I don't think it's the FAA's fault. I think it's Congress's fault. I really believe that Congress has really been derelict in its duty to oversee and direct what the future of this aviation agenda is. They seem to be more interested in funding subways and mass transit than they are the transportation mode where America leads the world. Why not pay some attention to that portion of our transportation sector where we are world leaders, like we are right here at Duncan. So my hope is that now that the reauthorization bill is just on the verge of being passed and signed by the President, we can get a lot of this nonsense behind us. The FAA can allow its leaders to start focusing on what needs to be done, and we can start to see this modernization. As a pilot, I just can't wait. I've been waiting for 20 years for NextGen and the modernization that we all know that is conceivable. And I think it's going to be places like Lincoln here, companies like Duncan that are really going to be innovative in this new field of sophisticated air traffic control and avionics development, WASP, all of these new technologies, which are really going to be the key to our future. But it takes leadership. It takes leadership in Congress. Now, one of the good pieces of news, of course, as I'm sure many of you know, this past year we got a General Aviation Caucus created in Congress, something that has been long overdue. And your senator here, Senator Johans, is one of the founders of that in the Senate. We have 110 now members of the House and some 25 or 30 members of the Senate. Our goal is to build that up by another 50% by this time next year. And we're going to have a lot of new people in Congress. This election coming up is going to be very much like the election in 1980 when I got into Congress with perhaps, we had 80 new faces in Congress that year. Some people are predicting we may have as many as 100 new faces in the House and Senate this year because there are so many people who really are just voting against who's ever in office. Just throw everybody out and start over again. So we're kind of encouraged by that.